Tonight's story offers us the opportunity to walk alongside Duke Dukart as he shares about the sudden loss of his wife Suzanne and his emotional journey along a path where grief and grace intertwine. My husband and I have had the pleasure of being able to call Duke and Suzanne good friends, witnessing their love of God and love for each other. The thing I admire most about Duke is how he always spoke the words out loud to Suzanne. She knew that he loved and admired her dearly. So much so that Suzanne often shushed him when he talked about how lucky he was. I promised tonight that I would take on Suzanne's role of shushing him if he gets too long-winded. The gift that Suzanne left me was her example of how she walked with the people around her throughout their struggles and joys of life, just like we are doing through St. Anthony's Stories of Grace. Please welcome Duke Dukart as he shares his story titled, "We Are Family, The Last Dance."
Well, I was just getting comfortable. First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for coming this evening. If I'd known there was this many, I would have probably charged admission, but I particularly want to thank Tom and Lorraine and April for getting these stories of grace kind of put together and rolling. I went to every one we've had so far, and it seems like you can take away something from each one you attend. I also want to give special thanks to my family, friends, members of St. Anthony's, parishioners, my grandson, that took the time after Mass on several occasions and came up and asked how I was doing and said, "You're praying for me." Can't tell you how much that made me feel, how good that made me feel, and helped me get through. Also, some of the real important people in my life is a group called Teams of Our Lady. It's a worldwide movement that actually we've had now in Fargo for going on 20 years, I think. We have started with 2 teams, which Suzanne and I were part of one of the 2 teams. We like to say we're Team 1. The other team doesn't necessarily care for that as much, but we just happened to have it on a Friday night. Theirs started on Saturday night. That's how we came to that. But Team 1 is my second family. I mean, they really are. Lorraine is part of my team. She mentioned Tom Smith is as well. Suzanne, I've been blessed to be part of that group for almost 20 years now. And I'm so blessed to be able to continue with the group as part of Team 1 for Teams of Our Lady. So anyway, 15 months ago, I never thought I'd be standing up here talking to y'all about, especially what I'll be talking about tonight. Please bear with me for a little bit. I want to give you a little bit of back history of my growing up, and in some ways how God was part of my life all the way through. So buckle up. I'll try to keep it somewhat short. I was born in Dickinson, North Dakota, to a Catholic family, a family that wasn't supposed to have any children. My parents were told they couldn't have any. My mom went through a couple of miscarriages, lost a set of twins, had a stillborn before any of us came to be. So our family is truly a miracle from God. I'm the third in line. Roxanne is the oldest. Laurel is here. Lolan is the second, and I came in. I'm Dwayne Lawrence Gabriel Dukart. I go by Duke. Now you know why. And we have a younger brother named Delane. I'm Big Duke, he's Little Duke, although he's bigger and bolder than I am. But he lives in Tennessee, and he was also here for the funeral. But they've gotten me through these last 15 months. Family, friends, teams. It's been a true blessing. At the age of 1, I came down with some intestinal virus, I guess. I was never really told what it was to this day. It would put me in the hospital for about a month. At the same time, another little girl had the same infection that I did, or virus that I had. She didn't make it. I did. God wasn't ready for me yet. I had people to meet, places to go, and get closer to God. I went to St. Joseph's Church and St. Joseph's Catholic School till I was about 11 years old. I was an altar server at the time when Masses were still done in Latin, so that kind of dates me a little bit. But by looking at me, that kind of dates me in itself. So I still remember our first priest, Monsignor Auberly, quite a gentleman. There's a guy that would literally leave an impression on you, and he literally left one on me one day. We, for some reason at our school, Monsignor would pass out the report cards every semester. And as he was passing them out, he'd look at them beforehand. Well, he came to me and looked at my report card, and he went like this, thunk, right on the forehead, you know. He said, "Dwayne, I think you can do better than this." Well, I don't know, it was third or fourth grade, fifth grade maybe. I got a D in religion, and he wasn't real happy about it. Well, needless to say, that was the last D in religion I ever got. So. In 1966, we moved to Hettinger, North Dakota, where my dad started a furniture and floor covering store. There was no Catholic school there. We did have a Catholic church we attended. That was my first experience with the public school system. During those years, I worked for my dad, and I was lucky enough to grow up in a small town and able to play 4 sports, which I loved dearly. And so I was, one of the athletes at school. Hard to believe in that. Then at the age of 17, my life changed forever. I got married the senior year of my high school before it started. And on December 6th, I remember it well, I was in English class, and I was called down to the office. I was going to be a father that day. We were blessed with Heather, our oldest, and I call her our oldest because Suzanne was her mom, trust me. And I've been lucky enough to have her in my life for 51 years. Sorry about that, Heather, about the age part. I ended up graduating from high school and further went on to UND. We were married for about 13 years, and then we got a divorce. And at the time, we were living in Rapid City, South Dakota. I had gotten custody of Heather, and Heather and I moved back to Grand Forks, North Dakota. At that time, I was working for a floor covering distributor out of Sioux Falls, and I was responsible for sales in North Dakota. Little did I know at the time, but Suzanne was working for the same company as I was. We had a sales meeting one year. It was late in the year, in early December, I want to say, too. But down in Sioux Falls, and after the meeting, the guys kind of got together and wanted to go to the local watering hole, which I've been known to do on a period of occasions. And some of the gals from the office were going to be there as well. Well, I know my talk is basically about the last dance, but I just want to tell you a little bit about the first dance. They had a live band there, and I was just kind of sitting there talking amongst the guys, and this beautiful young lady walked up to me. And we got to talking, and for some reason, I blurted out, "Well, I'll tell you one thing, I'm never going to get married again." And she looked at me, and she started laughing. First of all, she said, "I didn't ask you to marry me. I asked you if you wanted to dance." So that was my first dance with Suzanne. And that laugh was so infectious. That's one of the things I miss dearly today. We laughed a lot. Is that me, or is that? We started dating, long distance dating actually, because she was in Sioux Falls, I was up in Grand Forks. Shortly after that, And it wasn't too long after that, summer of 87, I asked Suzanne if she'd marry me. What was she thinking? She said yes. We were married May 28th, 1988. It's the best wedding I ever went to. Had a blast. We were both brought up as Catholics growing up. But after high school, it seemed like we both drifted away from the church, which also seemed to happen a lot back in the 70s. But we did get married in St. Bernard's Catholic Church down in Redfield, South Dakota. At that point, not only did Suzanne have a new husband, but she had a teenage daughter. A year later, we were blessed with our son, Joshua. And I had just started a job for a floor covering manufacturer out of New Jersey, and was responsible for 5 states, one of them being North Dakota. So in 1989, we moved to Fargo. And at that point, we started looking for a church, especially after we started another addition to the family. And Suzanne and I thought we better get back in the church. We went to several Catholic churches in town and landed right here at St. Anthony's. That was in 1990. So we've been a member of St. Anthony's since 1990. In 1991, we were blessed with a daughter, Amanda. It's made our family, we figured, complete. And we've been attending St. Anthony's ever since. Suzanne and I actually went to marriage classes, I guess I'll call them, up in Grand Forks, and a guy called Father Irmer happened to be one of the talkers. And oddly enough, Father Irmer kept coming back into our lives as we were at St. Anthony's. Suzanne and I were blessed with and created many memories over the almost 35 years we were married. Last May would have been our 35th. My job gave us the opportunity to travel to New York, to Mexico on several occasions, to Aruba, the Bahamas. Life was good. Suzanne was busy, not only working, but while I traveled, she was home with a teenager and 2 young kids. It's not an easy task, and not everybody's cut out to do it, but Suzanne, well, did a wonderful job. Thanks for bearing with me along this talk about my memory lane here, but now I want to share with you what I really came to talk to you about this evening. Suzanne and I were not only blessed to have 3 wonderful children, but we have the best son-in-law and best daughter-in-law we could have ever asked for. We also have 4 grandchildren, love them to death. And just recently, well, it's over a year now, we have a great-grandson. Suzanne really didn't get a chance to get to know him very well. We created many family memories as well as some family traditions along the way. One of our favorite family traditions is every year around this time of year, around Christmas, we'd get together and watch It's a Wonderful Life. It's truly my favorite movie in the world. At the end of the movie, George Bailey's brother would lift a glass of wine or whatever it was and made a toast to George, the richest man in town. I felt like George, and I feel like George every day of my life. Not for any riches that I have, but the riches I have right here with family, our church. I'm a very lucky man. Then you hear a little jingle bell, a little bell ring in the Christmas tree. And George says, Juju says to George, his little daughter, says, Daddy, a teacher says, when a bell rings, an angel gets their wings. Well, that kind of gave me a new thing to think about every time I hear a bell. So I think about my Suzanne getting her wings. Our plans are not God's. The last several years, Suzanne and I have been planning our retirement years together. The plans we wanted, where we wanted to go, the things we wanted to see. I semi-retired at 65, but was still working part-time. But it allowed us to go on a few trips. We went to Mesa on a few occasions. We'd go see our daughter Amanda every year in Seattle, where she works for a zoo out there. I just want to briefly toss this in for about Amanda. She's actually on her way right now to El Paso, transporting a rhinoceros down there. So she's on a field trip, we'll say. It's not a little rhinoceros, it's about 5,000 pounds right now. When Heather and I went out there last June, we actually got to feed that rhinoceros. But anyway, that's just a little side note. That's why my kids said, you better write something down, Dad, you're going to start to ramble. About 3 years ago, Suzanne and I decided a couple things that turned out to be great decisions. After talking amongst ourselves for about 10 years, we decided it was time to do our last will and testament and do a health directive. So we hooked up with an attorney and got that accomplished. The second thing we did is for me to fully retire. Suzanne had been kind of prompting me for about 6 months prior, and she'd say, when are you going to retire, Duke? I say, I don't know, give me a calendar. So she gave me a calendar. I just said August 26th. Everybody could have had their vacations that I was working with by then, and I could retire. I felt better about retiring. Well, that was probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. It gave us 2 years to spend together. A few months before Suzanne passed, she was explaining to me some of the things that she did around the house, which is numerous, believe me. Things like the laundry, which had to be done in a particular way, and I was not capable to do them that way. But other things like bills online, auto pay, what all the passwords were to get into anything I needed to get into, the bank or whatever the situation. She had them all in a little book. But she went over that with me just a few months prior to her passing. And it wasn't that unusual because she'd done that in the past once before, but knowing that, she knew me well enough to know that I wouldn't remember, so she was reminding me again. Then, sometime the summer of 2022, we were invited to our nephew's wedding on September 9th, 2022. We were really excited about it. Amanda was coming home for the wedding. She hadn't been home since before COVID. So Suzanne and I were just ecstatic. Amanda hadn't met yet Kaya, our youngest granddaughter. Hadn't met Jalen, our great-grandson, yet. So it was pretty exciting to have her home. Well, Amanda came home a couple days prior to the wedding and was staying with us. And one day, Suzanne and her were walking around the house, just chatting away. I was out in the kitchen, probably cooking. That's the one thing I could do. Anyway, I overheard them talking. They stopped by Suzanne's curio where she has all these little keepsakes in there. And she said to Amanda, what would you like when I'm gone? And I thought it was a little odd, but, being Amanda doesn't get back to us very often, I thought, it's probably not a bad idea to ask, I guess. So I didn't think that much about it. The day before we were married, we were married a long time ago. The day before the wedding, the evening before, we wanted the kids over for dinner, and Suzanne had asked a neighbor to come over and take a family picture. That's the picture I have here and have up here. This is something Suzanne wanted terribly bad. And I have to give her credit for making it happen. I mean, she sent out a post to the kids, or a text, I guess, saying, dinner at 6, picture at 7. Be here. In May, before that wedding, Suzanne had just turned 65. She just had taken her first wellness checkup about a month prior to the wedding. She came home after the checkup and said everything looks good, she said, but her doctor had talked about a little anxiety issue that she was having, apparently. I mean, she was a pretty healthy woman, all in all. But having anxiety, I can certainly believe, living with me for almost 35 years, would give anybody anxiety. But she was also so excited about, Amanda coming and getting together with her, all of her siblings and all of our family for the wedding. Well, the wedding venue was one of those venues out in the country, close to Hutchinson, Minnesota. And it was in a barn, actually. On the drive to the wedding, Suzanne was, I thought, quieter than normal, but I'd asked her if anything was wrong, and she said nothing was wrong. But I sensed something. The wedding, as I mentioned, is on September 9th, and that was also Heather and Chris's 22nd anniversary. But I'm so glad and thankful that they came to the wedding that we were at and got to spend that last moments with Suzanne. Amanda was there as well. Josh and Sarah were actually flying to Sarah's sister's wedding in Seattle. And they were going to hook up with Amanda, I think, after the weekend after Mandy flew back. Well, the wedding and reception were very nice. The wedding dance started. Susanna was high on life. Kids used to kind of give her some grief about high on life. Well, not that so much, but she wasn't much of a drinker, but every once in a while on occasion she'd have a glass or two of wine. And they say, well, Mom's getting tipsy. And Suzanne said, I'm just high on life. And Suzanne was truly high on life. And she was truly enjoying the evening. It was kind of a tradition that her family, at all the weddings, they would play the song, We Are Family. And they all get up and dance and gyrate. And it was mostly the ladies, I must say. So I left the dance floor and watched for a little bit. And then I wandered off, because I kind of like to work the room, And wandered off, was talking to a couple of guys, probably about 50 feet from where we were sitting at a table earlier. And I guess when Suzanne got done with that dance, she went and sat down and asked Chris or Heather, said she wasn't feeling well, and for them to get her a glass of water. So they did. When they came back, Suzanne kind of collapsed. I'm not sure if I'm getting this 100% right. I didn't see this. And they were there to catch her and lay her gently down on the floor. Well, Suzanne's brother, Tom, came running and said, Duke, something's happened to Suze. Excuse me. So I came running and knelt down beside Suzanne and held her hand. Now, at this point, she was conscious, and we didn't know what really had happened. And I was holding her hand, and we were trying to keep her awake and conscious, because she said, I'm just so tired. So we didn't want her to drift off. We had, the ambulance was on the way. And I don't know, it was probably 10, 15, or 20 miles, but I don't know how far it was from town, I don't remember. But anyway, they were on their way. And the last thing she whispered to me as I leaned over to give her a kiss, was I have to go now. Well, I rode in the ambulance it was Glencoe Regional Hospital. I rode in the front seat with the driver, and Suzanne was, of course, getting in the back being worked on. Apparently, we lost her for a moment on the way to the hospital, and they brought her back. We were able to revive her. But, you know, I didn't know that at the time, and all the way there, I was thinking to myself, this will be fine, and well, you know, she may have to spend a night in the hospital, and we'll be on our way home tomorrow, you know. Boy, was I wrong. When we got to the hospital, I'm going to take a shot at it around 8:30 to 9 o'clock. They took Suzanne through the emergency area, and the medical team was on their way, if not already there. I went into the lobby to be with my family. It wasn't a short time. The doctor came out and said to me, Duke, things don't look very good for Suzanne. Susanna just had a major heart attack, and my heart just sunk. I didn't see that coming, although there was some history of health issues in Suzanne's family. The doctor then said to us that myself and my family could go into the room where they're working on Suzanne and actually watch them work on Suzanne. I'd never really heard of that before. I mean, we didn't even have masks on. They just said, come on back, guys. So someone was always in that room, one of us, at least, if not more, with Suzanne during the whole process as they're working on her. Well, I know we lost her, I think, twice during that time frame. She cold blued twice. And they were able to revive her again. And they got a pulse, a slight pulse. And every time that happened, that gave us a little glimmer of hope. But then it came to a point where the doctor looked at me and says, Duke, we've done everything we can. What do you want to do? I said, I know what Suzanne wants to do. That's kind of where the healthcare directive came in handy. As we talked about it was all on paper. She did not want to be a burden to anybody. And she sure wasn't to me. At some point during the course of all this, Heather had given Josh and Sarah a call because they, as I said, were on their way to Seattle. They were actually just had boarded an airplane in Minneapolis. She'd called them and FaceTimed Josh. Had Mom on the screen too, Suzanne. And she said to Josh, you better say goodbye to Mom. Heart-wrenching. Well, I don't know how they did it, but Josh and Sarah were able to get off the plane. They had a vehicle at the airport, and they had to start heading to Glencoe. Unfortunately, Suzanne had passed away before they got there. However, when they did get there, they still had an investigator in looking over Suzanne. Because it was such a sudden death, I guess that's what they do. But anyway, after she was done, Josh and Sarah were able to go back and say their last goodbyes to Suzanne. We made a few phone calls to family, friends, Father Braun, Father Irmer, Boulder's funeral home. Boulders had to make arrangements to come and get Suzanne. Another good thing about a will, we had in the will who was going to be our funeral home, which I was kind of drawing a blank at the moment, but I think Chris may help me out with that, or Heather, one of the two. Well, the next several days, we were preparing for a funeral. My kids were amazing. And I want to particularly thank Chris. He kept us on task. He knew what needed to be done and probably had his wits about him where some of us didn't. We were all involved in the decision making. I was certainly involved with it, but Chris kept us moving, and that got the process done. Because quite frankly, it was somewhat of a blur those few days. So Amanda's long weekend turned into a 10-day stay. And my brother from Tennessee flew in for the funeral as well. The prayer service here at St. Anthony's and the funeral were beautiful. A real celebration of Suzanne's life and a real testament to her life. After the dust had kind of settled and everybody went home, I woke up in the morning and realized two things. No one was in the house. It was the first time in 67 years that I lived by myself. The other thing I felt was real grief. I know we've all lost friends, family, parents, but I don't know that I ever felt grief like I felt that day. When you lose your spouse, it takes on a whole new level. Part of me was gone too. Well, God gives us choices. I could either be bitter at God and angry with Him, for taking Suzanne from me, or I can get on my knees and pray in thanksgiving for all the years God gave Suzanne to me. Well, I got on my knees and I started praying. Two prayers that, everybody knows that I've been praying most of my life. Of course, the Lord's Prayer. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Certainly took on new meaning for me at that point. The other one is a serenity prayer, which Suzanne gave me a coin several years ago that she bought at Hurley's. She worked there for a while too. But it's the serenity prayer, and I've carried it with me every day. I went back to Hurley's and bought another one and put one in her vault before she was buried. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. That hit me as well. Well, God gave me the grace, the gift of the grace of acceptance that day. I accepted His will being done. You don't always have to like it, but I needed to accept it. Somewhere along the line I got sidetracked, so I'm going to digress for a minute. Sorry about that. It's in here somewhere, but I don't have my glasses on because I can't see with them or without them right now. But Suzanne worked at St. Anthony's for Father Irmer, so he came back into our life again at some point. She was a pastoral minister here. Many of you know her when she was working here at the church. Believe me, this was not in her wheelhouse. Suzanne was never the type of person that was, she never wanted any, the lights on her. Very humble lady. But Father Irmer, offered her this job and she took it. Well, a week hadn't gone by and she came home in tears. She says, Duke, I don't think I can do this. Father Irmer asked her to do some things that she'd never done. One of them might be come up in front of the church and talk. She was so nervous when she had to do things like that. But every time she did, I'd sit back and listen to her with pride showing, and she did a wonderful job. But she also served the poor, those who needed help for rent or food or gas to get to wherever. She helped the elderly, went and visited the elderly. She was truly a servant of God. And I can't tell you how proud I was of that woman and how much I love her. Okay, back on track. The last thing I'd like to share with you is something my brother had emailed me a while back, that a minister friend of him from Tennessee, a minister friend of his from Tennessee, had emailed him, because he'd lost his wife, this minister, in the September of 2020, a couple of years earlier. And they were married almost 50 years. You know, marriage isn't always easy. You definitely have to work at it. And Suzanne and I tried to work at it. But when you love someone that so much and lose them, this is something for you all here to think about, especially those getting married or that are married. Ernie, I was just talking to Becky before I came up here. They wanted to hold hands, and Ernie said, "For what?" You know, so anyway, things you'll never hear, you'll never say this. I'll never say I told her that I loved her too often. You'll never hold her too often, or held hands too often, or kissed her too often. I'll never say I spent too much time with her, although we got to spend a lot of time together. I'll never say I brought her flowers too often, or that I listened to her too often when she told me about her dreams and aspirations for her life. I'll never say that I praised her for her great character and beauty of heart too often. I'll never say that I thank God for her too often. And I'll never say that I prayed with her or for her too often. A little over a week ago, Lorraine Bernhard asked me to go to adoration. Adoration is something I've never done. Suzanne and I have talked about it, and I've thought about it over the years many times. But I took Lorraine up on her offer and went to adoration. As I was sitting there and kneeling there and praying, thinking about Suzanne, I just felt all of a sudden a peacefulness and a calmness come over me. It was almost as if God said to me, "Duke, Suzanne is everywhere you want her to be, except with you." That's all I have as far as my talk goes this evening. April's has a little, you get a chance to share Suzanne's last dance. And believe me, looking at this dance is not a woman you're going to see that you think that was going to be passing away a few hours later. She was high on life. She's definitely high on life. Thank you for your time.
Get up, everybody.
Thank you, Duke, for doing that. We're so proud of you. And we love Suzanne, and we miss her. And you guys have a beautiful family. Let's give Duke a round of applause.